Hello viewers, welcome back to the lab. This episode is going to be a vintage PC build. We're going to be using this cute looking 386 PC that I've had in the lab for quite a while. But there's been various bits drifting around the lab. I haven't really got round to doing it, mainly because I didn't have a case for it to go in, but I do now. But before we get started, I just want to thank PCBWay for sponsoring this episode. This episode of Dex's Tech Lab has been brought to you with the support of PCBWay, the one-stop shop for all your PCB manufacturing needs. I have used PCBWay myself, so I know firsthand the quality of their products and their support. They have all the PCB options you could possibly need for PCB prototypes. They also offer 3D printing, CNC machining, sheet metal work and injection moulding services for making prototype parts for your projects. If you want to check them out, go to PCBWay.com or follow the links in the video description. Right, let's get over to the bench and have a look at this. Right, so here's all of the bits. I have to say I'm pretty certain I don't have everything that I need. I certainly haven't found a floppy cable, so I'm going to have to go have a hunt for one of those. There will also be, I think I will need some plastic runners for the floppy drive, because it doesn't mount directly to the chassis. It slides in on these little plastic runners, so I suspect I'm probably going to have to go and source something there. There is also a foot missing off the case, so that's going to need to be sorted. So what we're going to do with this, first off, get the case dismantled, cleaned up as best we can. We'll start putting everything in the case. We'll see how far we go. So this is the motherboard that we're going to be using. It's a 386 DX40 board. The processor was made by AMD. So this is one of the last 386 boards there were. These got shrunk down such a lot. I mean, they're an awesome little, cute little motherboard. So some of the technology that filtered down from the 486s allowed you to shrink some of these later generation 386s down even further. And they became a bit of a budget option. If you didn't need a 486, you wanted something a bit cheaper, then you could go with a fast 386. I'm not entirely sure who makes this board yet. I seem to remember I did find out at one point, but I can't remember who that was. So when we boot it up, we'll have a look at the BIOS codes and we'll see if we can figure out who actually makes it. This board came to me, I think, in a teardown. I think it might have been a microplate reader. I bought it expecting to find a 486, but I got a 386, so just took this out and saved it and didn't bother making a video on it. When this originally arrived, I think it only had 2 megabytes of RAM, but this has been expanded. I think it's got 8 in it. I think these are 1 megabyte SIMs. The battery, that had a Varta nickel metal hydride battery in. A while ago I removed that because it was leaking, obviously. I replaced the CMOS chip with just a regular Dallas real-time clock IC, so that was brand new a couple of years ago. And I also picked up an 80387 maths coprocessor as well, so I've just bunged that in anyway. So it's not actually clocked at the same speed as the processor. It's actually a 33 megahertz and this is a 40, but you tend to find maths coprocessors overclock quite easily, and it seems to be running fine at 40 megahertz, so winner winner. So yeah, nice little 386 board there with 5 ISA slots. So that's the motherboard. Now we've got some bits in here that have been accumulating. Floppy drive, there is an old Maxtor IDE disk there. So that's the hard disk, and we have the expansion cards. So the video card is a fairly basic Cirrus Logic GD5424. I think it might have a megabyte of RAM, but it might be 512. So yeah, just a standard Super VGA card. Nothing special. And for I/O, we have one of these multi-I/O cards. So it's got IDE, floppy drive, and 2 serial ports and a parallel port. So a very, very common thing. You use these in the early 90s because we didn't have those integrated chipsets on our motherboards. So you always needed a Super I/O card, as they were known. This one is made by Winbond, or the chipset is at least. Right, well, if we have a look at this rather grubby looking case, I picked this up last weekend when I was at the Retro Computer Festival in Cambridge at the Centre for Computing History. They have a free bench, so it's just stuff that they want to get rid of. They put it on a bench, and if you want it, you can take it for free. This was on there, so I picked it up. I wasn't expecting anything side, it's literally just a case. We are missing one of the blanking plates, so that's probably another thing to add to the list of things to find for part 2. Yeah, underneath it looks pretty clean, but we are missing one of those feet, so that's something that's going to have to be fixed, so we'll need to source some new feet. Overall, the case is actually pretty good. There's a few scuffs and scrapes, and it's proper dirty, and it doesn't want to come off. I love the way there's a rectangular patch. I'm not sure whether you can, let me turn the brightness down on your screen there. There's a patch just there which is just the size of a monitor stand, so it's obviously got very grubby and dirty. When it was in use, and it's just ingrained in, but we should be able to sort that out. Now if we have a look at the front, we've got some scuff marks and stuff like that, some writing on the front in marker, so we'll have to see if we can get rid of that. But overall, it's not cracked or broken or anything. It looks like it's just grubby. So hopefully this will clean up pretty nice. There are some stickers on here. I was kind of inclined to get those off and give it a clean. But it looks like this has actually come from the Cavendish Laboratory, which is part of Cambridge University. So it's obviously doing a bit of physics research, which is actually quite cool. But I suspect I will take the stickers off. So if we have a look at the back, we've got the power supply rattling around inside. I threw that in the case because that's my power supply. So when I picked this up, there was literally nothing in it. Again, University of Cambridge, Cavendish Laboratory, LTP magnet group, probably. It looks like it had been used for some kind of physics research. So there we go, we've got the inside of the case. So the power supply, as I said, was one of mine that I had laying around. That's a pretty bog standard Aztec unit. It's a decent make though. So it all looks pretty clean in here. This should be just about perfect for what we want. Now, as we're going to give this a bath, probably be wise to remove all this here and the speaker. That's the bundle of wires. We'll deal with that later. There we go, that's the case all stripped down, ready to go for a bath, and we'll see how well this case cleans up with some use of the magic erasers. So that's all the case cleaned up. As you can see, it's come up pretty well. The magic eraser made a short work of that writing that was on the front and the stickers and all the grime and scuffs and stuff. There's still one or two tiny little spots where you can just see a little bit, but considering this was just a free junk case that was being given away, then I think we've done pretty well on that. So yeah, the grime and everything's come off the top. The stickers have come off. There's a few scratches and stuff on the side, but it's an old thing. It has patina, so that's fine. Yeah, that side's pretty good as well. So really happy with that. So yeah, these magic erasers, if you haven't discovered these for your vintage computing electronic stuff, definitely need to go and buy a pack of them. They're brilliant. Saves you so much time and effort. And the main chassis is cleaned up really nicely too. There's no rust on it. Well, saying that, there is the odd tiny little bit, but considering its age, 1996, it's doing pretty well. So I think there might be a few screws missing in a few places, like just here, so we'll have to make sure those go back in. The floppy drive does look like it has little plastic sleds that probably attach to the side of the floppy disk and then slide down in there. So I don't think we're going to be able to get a floppy drive to fit in there without making something up. So That is definitely going to have to be something for part 2. So over the few days that I've been filming this, a few things have arrived in the post. I've got here some new feet for the case to replace that missing one. And I've also got a beige cover to go over the 5¼ inch drive bay. I've only got one of these. I'm actually hoping in the future we can pop a 5¼ inch drive in there. Anyway, so we'll only need one of those, so I've got one of those. And the other thing to arrive were these motherboard mounting posts, which are used specifically on the 80 style cases. They're not the same as the later ATX, so I realised I had none of these left, so thankfully a couple of Twitter users came to my rescue, High Juice and Brassic Gamer. Thank you very, very much for sending me some of these. Very, very handy to have. So let's see about installing some of the bits into this, but first there's a couple of little things that I'm going to do to the case. There's a couple of missing screws off various bits. There's one just there, and I've just noticed this section here is actually screwed in. Funnily enough, these are normally riveted, but in this case they're screwed in, so screw missing there. So I'll just go have a quick look over everything, put screws in where they're missing, etc. Now what I'm going to do here, because this screws in, is actually, there's a slight bit of adjustment in where that sits. So I'm going to leave those screws a little bit loose for the moment. When the motherboard goes in and we get some cards plugged in, we'll be able to line that up properly. So this particular case has a removable hard disk tray, which is probably why there was a screw missing off there, because it had been out in the past. So we'll take this opportunity to put the hard disk in. While this is still wobbling around, maybe it's time to replace those missing feet. So let's go ahead and put the motherboard in. So the brass screw-in standoffs that are already here in this case are actually the right setup for what we want. So I'm going to need the plastic ones in. 1, 2, 3. Oh no, not that one. 1, 2, 3. So the motherboard's in there, it's nice and loose, so it moves around a little bit, and of course that card cage moves as well. So what we'll do now is just plug a couple of cards in and get everything to line up properly. And then we can tighten these up. So everything should be just in the right place. So next to go in is the AT power supply, slightly different to ATX. The power connectors are different, and most importantly, the power is an actual mains switch, which you have to wire in, screw in at the front. But these are all standard fitment, so they just interchange. Yeah, on the later ATX power supplies, they got rid of this because, well, it's just added expense, and for people building and maintaining PCs, it wasn't great having mains wiring inside the machine. Better to have it all contained inside the box. So that's one of the reasons why they did ATX with its soft power on. So this should go in here. This is probably also a good idea to reinstall the front panel stuff. Right, what I'm going to do now is just connect up the power cables to the motherboard. We'll power that on and check it's working okay. Incidentally, in case you're wondering what all this is with these horrible vampire connectors on, I think this power supply came out of some piece of test equipment and it needed an extra power feed for something, and they obviously just attached this to it. So I'll leave that there. It's not doing any harm. So that's just been attached to the main power connector. Now, one thing you got to remember when you're connecting up these AT power cables is there is a right and wrong way to do them. It was such a common thing in back in the day when you're building PCs to accidentally mix these up, and it was just disastrous results. Absolutely crazy how they ended up coming up with this design that the plugs you could reverse the plugs, and it was just absolutely bonkers. So anyway, the way you do it, you just have the black wires in the middle. Simple. But obviously we all made mistakes, and I know I certainly did. Right, well, let's just try turning this on. Excellent. 8 megabytes of RAM. A whole 8 megabytes. Right, well, that's not going to do anything more now because there's nothing else plugged in. But that's great because it proves the motherboard's absolutely fine and we're all ready to go and put the rest of it back together. So as you can see, we're starting to get there. Got more and more of the cables connected up. The hard disk is now attached, and I'm just about to have a look at the floppy drive. Now, when I showed you the case originally, I did mention that the floppy drive mounting point is a bit weird, which looks like it's meant to have a plastic bit that screws onto the drive, and then the drive then slides in there. So we obviously don't have those, so we need to think up some way to solve that. Now, I think it should be pretty simple. It's literally just a rectangular piece of plastic. So I think in part 2 we'll definitely have to have a look at seeing how we can make something to go in there. So what I've done temporarily for the floppy drive is just to tape it in, basically. So I'll put it roughly in the right place and then put some tape on. It'll hold that way fine until I can actually work out a proper way of mounting that. Right, so I've got everything connected up. Hard disk is connected and the floppy drive as well. So we're all ready to go switch this on. I've got a DOS boot floppy disk in there, and I think there is some flavour of Unix on this disk. I remember playing around with it a few years ago. So Unix is a Microsoft variant of Unix. So what we'll do, we'll boot off the floppy disk first, and then we'll switch over to the hard disk and see what's on it. Well, that definitely works fine, doesn't it? So what we'll do now, we switch over and boot the hard disk. Because I think that's got Unix on it. I don't think I'm going to keep that. I think I'm going to have something slightly different. We will see. That will be in for part 2. Yes, it looks like I've got SCO Unix on here. So I'm going to finish up here and call it quits on part 1. In part 2 we're going to look at finishing the case off a little bit, obviously installing this cover on, but it doesn't quite fit properly, it's a little bit loose. Figuring out how to mount the floppy drive without it using just tape. So that'll be an interesting challenge. Now, when it comes to the drive that I want to have in here, at the moment I do not have a 5¼ inch 1.2 megabyte floppy drive spare that I can get that can go in here. So if there is anybody out there who has a spare one and would like to sell it to me, please get in contact. And of course in part 2 we will get the operating system changed from the SCO Unix, which is on this, to something like possibly SCO Unix or vanilla AT&T Unix, something like that. And when I'm doing that, I'll explain all the reasons why I've wanted to build a Unix system for quite a long time. Okay, I hope you found this video interesting, and if you want to see part 2 and you're not subscribed, then the best thing to do is hit that subscribe button, and you'll catch me on the next video. Okay, thanks for watching everyone. Bye for now.